On this edition of the program, why Joe Biden is damned either way on Israel, and we talk the politics of liberty, including Donald Trump's visit to the LP, with the incoming executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey. It's all coming up. Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for May 8th. 2024, your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you here in Austin, Texas. And we're going to start with the news, okay? Yesterday, I want to make sure that I get this right, Hamas announced a ceasefire to the IDF incursion into Gaza. Israel, very shortly after that, rejected the idea that there was any kind of agreement, and to the exact opposite, the Rafah incursion began. Rafah, for those of you who are unaware, is considered to be the last sector of Gaza that has been untouched by the IDF's campaign thus far. It is also where the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, for those if I'm using alphabet soup, have asked refugees to move to. Israel says that they are facilitating those refugees to move to places north of that now, and that Rafah is the last stronghold for Hamas's leadership, notably Yahya Sinwar. From my vantage point, and boy, it is amateur, we are moving into an end game here, not of the entire conflict, obviously, that has gone on for a very, very, very long time. So long that it's controversial even to say when it began, because it might reveal that you are on one side or the other. But for this particularly violent chapter of the history of Israel and the Palestinian territories, we likely have weeks or months to go, all of which will play out not only in blood in the region, but also online with the respective narrators narrating. So why did the ceasefire proposal kind of happen, but then definitely not? Well, the New York Times has a little bit of insight to it. The ceasefire was supposed to contain 3 phases. The first phase was relatively uncontroversial. It was a prisoner exchange. The big question there was, because there is a multiple issue here, so Hamas would release a hostage, but they needed a multiple amount of prisoners that are being held by Israel. So there's a little multiplication there. The problem is that Hamas doesn't have as many living hostages as they did when they abducted them 7 months ago on October 7th. So there was some back and forth on whether or not remains counted, but that was something that is work-outable. The second phase was really the bigger issue, and I'm going to read directly from the New York Times here. The warring parties would likely clash over the definition of quote-unquote sustainable calm. One of the officials in the Middle East said that Hamas viewed the term as an end to the war, with Israel halting its military actions and withdrawing troops from Gaza. The official said that Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was expected to push back on that definition. I will add editorially, doy. One official said that the negotiating parties agreed on the term sustainable calm weeks ago after Israel objected to any reference of permanent ceasefire. Israeli officials have consistently said that they oppose any agreement that explicitly called for an end to the war. It is important to point out that the word ceasefire, even here in America, is something that means different things to different people. Actually, let me go back on that. In America, a ceasefire pretty much means what Hamas meant by sustainable calm, which is to say that the war is over. Israel withdraws its troops, and you can assume, based on the fact that that would be the end of anything that was happening, that Hamas remains in control of Gaza. That is something that post October 7th is not going to happen. Now, Israelis, being the ever opinionated group that they are, specifically under the pressure of what is happening now, have tremendous disagreements as to how they should get from here to there, meaning the dismantling of Hamas. And many very, very loud Israelis believe that there should be whatever kind of agreement needs to happen with Hamas to bring back whatever hostages are alive. And indeed, there's blood on Netanyahu's hands, the prime minister of Israel, for not doing this earlier. But all of that is the reality. I'm not foolish enough to recite the history of this region to you guys. I know enough to know that it is stupid to think that you can wander in off the street and confidently recall a past that is so disputed. Beyond that, you, dear listener, know that I got a rule when it comes to reporting out of war zones, which is to believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. However, it's been a while since we spent a lot of time on this program talking about the thing that does clash with our purview, and that is the 2024 election. So with that, I want to bring a tweet from writer Michael Tracy here. He writes, Trump is making his big play for Jewish voters by arguing that the Democratic Party under Joe Biden is, quote, full-blown anti-Israel and anti-Semitic after Biden spent the past several months giving Israel unprecedented, unconditional military support and just signed another $24 billion. He is commenting on a Reuters article that has the following quote from Caroline Levitt, a Trump campaign spokesperson. Quote, Jewish Americans are realizing that the Democrat Party has turned into a full-blown anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-terrorist cabal. That's why more and more Jewish Americans are supporting President Trump. What struck me about that is that Joe Biden, the president of the United States, finds himself in a bit of a superposition. He is Schrodinger's president. Both a full-blown anti-Semite leading a party for which Hamas has a constituency, and Genocide Joe, the Israel puppet who has the blood of tens of thousands of Gazans on his hands. So what does that mean going forward? I'm going to pause before we do it, just to acknowledge that, yes, this is a cynical angle on a very serious topic. I'm not here to say that it is not serious. I'm here to say that there are people that are better equipped to talk about it. My job is to break down the presidential election. It's what you guys listen to me for. It's what you guys pay me for. And with that, we're going to do it. So let's take a look here. This is President Joe Biden's approval. We're going to start at October 7th. He is underwater by 10 points. Right now, he is underwater by 17.1. Now, you might say that that is damning. But in my opinion, Israel and Gaza is a very loud issue. It's a very present issue. But it's not particularly prescient in the lives of everyday Americans. For a certain kind of news follower, it might seem suffocating. And the images so horrific, or the idea of rising anti-Semitism in America so scary that it's all you can think about. But I believe that Joe Biden has eroded in his approval, not from October 7th, not because of what is happening in the Middle East, but rather because we've yet to tame inflation, because the economy, no matter how much you are told otherwise, is not satisfactory to the majority of Americans. But let's focus on the Middle East for a second. A TIPP Insights poll on Biden's approval, only 6% of respondents thought that Joe Biden deserved an A grade for his handling of Israel. That was the lowest A grade percentage that he got on all of the issues polled. For context, he got marginally more A grades for issues like the border and the economy. He earned F grades for his handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict from 30% of respondents. I believe this says that nobody really likes what Joe Biden is doing in Israel, but it is far down the list of priorities. And if he loses this election, it will be because of the reasons above it and not Israel and Gaza. Besides, we have no idea where this is going to end up by November anyway. And let me further illustrate it with this. Joe Biden right now, by the numbers, if the election were to be held today and not in just short of 6 months from now, would lose this election. And he'd lose this election because he got blown out in the Sun Belt. Take a look at these. These are the current Real Clear Politics averages as I am recording this. Nevada, North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia. All of them over 3 and some over 5% aggregate leads in all of these polls. Where are things closer? Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and very key, Michigan. Joe Biden is down 1 point in Pennsylvania, 1.2 in Michigan, and 1.8 in Wisconsin. Now, the reason why that matters is because there's been a lot of ink spilled, proverbial ink, about Michigan because of its Islamic population, that Joe Biden was going to lose the election because of these voters. Right now, that does not appear to be the case. It appears that Joe Biden is losing the voters in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and North Carolina. States that he desperately needs to win, and 3 out of the 4 he won in 2020. But maybe he's losing because Democrats have begun to sour on him. The Democrats don't like the job that he has done on Israel. Well, let's take a look at this. Democrats have specifically soured on the Israeli effort in Gaza. A March 2024 poll showed that only 18% of Democrats approved of Israeli military action in Gaza. That was down from a 36% approval in November of the previous year. So, okay, Democrats hate this war. Why doesn't Joe Biden do something about it? Well, it appears that Democrats have complicated views on this. And to be totally honest, I think a lot of it is probably subject to how these questions are worded when the polls go out. But let's give an example. If you believe that the IDF incursion into Gaza is that unpopular, you would imagine that protests against it would also be popular. Not quite so. In another Gallup poll, this one taken in March, actually the same one as the one before, less than 50% of Democrats are in favor of those campus protests. This has left the Biden administration in, well, no man's land. It's beholden to two factions that quite simply have little regard for how the White House will fare, and that's Israel and Hamas. Biden can't stray too far from Israel, because otherwise we're essentially resetting our entire foreign policy in the Middle East. By the way, a reminder, our Secretary of State was in Saudi Arabia last week trying to normalize relations between the kingdom and Israel. But at the same time, you can't underestimate the plight of the Gazan people. These are extraordinarily harrowing and violent images. And there's no way that you can combat that by saying, well, Hamas brought it on themselves. It's just a rejection of empathy that politically will not play. So the result is you get a lot of mushy middle statements and no leverage for the White House to do what they desperately want, which is to end Americans talking about this. But by the way, you want to know who else wants it to end? Biden's predecessor and possible successor, Donald Trump. In an interview with a rightward Israeli paper, Israel Hayom, he said that Israel needed to, quote, finish up its war with Hamas and that the country was, quote, losing a lot of support among the world. Here's the reality. Foreign policy will never be the reason why a president wins or loses an election. The economy will, jobs will, sometimes crime will. That's the reason why you win and lose. Now, this is going to be a close election. You need every voter that you possibly can to come and turn out. But the Middle East in general is a place that is extraordinarily dangerous to your electoral hopes if you linger there. If the headlines are about the Middle East for more than a week and a half, you've got problems. And we're on month 7 in Gaza. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Support the show, fully independent operation, dependent only on you, the listener. At our Patreon, you get the option to get 2 bonus episodes each and every week for the small price of $3. Price of a cup of coffee. If you'd buy me a cup of coffee each week to get 2 bonus episodes, well, one place to do it, including, we had a great back and forth. Kristi Noem of South Dakota, I always mix that up with the Dakotas. It's one of the Dakotas. She wrote a book where she bragged about killing her dog because the dog was being bad, and she's a tough, hardcore farm girl that does the things that need to be done. That immediately got a lot of backlash because bragging about killing a dog is weird. And then she lied about meeting Kim Jong-un. Oh, also in the book, she says that if she were to ever get to the White House, she would make sure that Joe Biden's dog, Commander, was off the property. Now, it is off the property, but I take her rhetorical meaning. Here's the real kicker, though. She says, Commander meet Cricket. Cricket being the dog that she killed on the farm. She is really jazzed about killing this dog, man. She really thinks that killing this dog says something about her. She was on Meet the Press. No, not Meet the Press. Face the Nation. And that's what our Monday show is going through all the Sunday clips. And oh my God, I can't remember. Such a disaster. She's DOA. Man, I don't know who... If this is any kind of audition for a VP, thank you. Don't call us, we'll call you. Whew! You can actually see that clip on my Twitter, Justin R. Young, because I cut it out. It was just too good. So after the Patreon folks got it, like 12 hours early, I cut out just that little clip so everybody could see it. But that's the kind of stuff that you get all the time. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Let's get into the news that we didn't have a chance to catch in this episode. Stormy Daniels, the porn star whose hush money payment case is at the center of Donald Trump's criminal trial, has been called as a witness to the stand by prosecutors on Tuesday. Daniels is a critical witness and is expected to tell the jurors how her alleged sexual encounter with Trump in 2006 touched off a plot to buy her silence, and prosecutors say it illegally influenced the 2016 presidential election. In the final weeks of that campaign, Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, arranged to pay $130,000 to Daniels so she wouldn't go public with her story. She indeed didn't and said that it was a lie. Prosecutors have accused Trump of directing the payment as part of a conspiracy to violate campaign finance laws and hide information from voters. Trump's defense team made a last-ditch bid to block Daniels from testifying about the alleged sex act, but the judge ruled that the topic was allowed, and indeed, that's what she did, at least up until when we are recording here. Apparently details so graphic that some of the jury shielded their eyes. Scandalous. Ukrainian security authorities announced on Tuesday that they thwarted an assassination plot targeting President Volodymyr Zelensky. 2 colonels from Ukraine's state security service responsible for protecting top officials were arrested for allegedly conspiring with Russia's FSB intelligence service to kill Zelensky and high-ranking officials, including SBU chief Vasyl Myolek and military intelligence head Kyrylo Budanov. This is the first known instance of such senior Ukrainian officials working covertly for Russia. The SBU explained how the FSB sought individuals close to Zelensky's security detail who could take him hostage and later assassinate him. The plot also included plans to assassinate Budanov using missile strikes, followed by drone attacks to eliminate survivors. So things are going great in Ukraine. Good to know. Good to know. Finally, Judge Eileen Cannon has suspended a crucial deadline in the classified documents case involving former President Donald Trump. The decision follows claims by Trump's legal team that special counsel Jack Smith's prosecutors mishandled the evidence. This is, of course, the confidential information in Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lago docs case, as it's referred to by the cool kids. Trump's lawyers alleged that some classified documents weren't in their original order. Prosecutors countered, explaining that intra-box document sequencing is irrelevant to the defense, emphasizing the order in which documents were found may have shifted slightly. They also argued that Trump's co-defendant, Walt Nauta, had ample time to raise objections about document sequencing. This suspension further delays the decision on which classified documents Trump and his co-defendants intend to use at trial, adding uncertainty to whether the trial will occur before the election, for which I haven't heard an argument to say that this is definitely happening before the election. So the Supreme Court seems to have punted the January 6th case. Looks like the Mar-a-Lago docs case is now punted. Those, in my mind, are the 2 most damaging to Trump because they're a little clearer. Not allowed to keep a thing. He kept a thing. January 6th was so ugly. Everybody's got specific opinions about it. He tried to steal an election. That's palpable. It should be illegal to try to steal an election. That plays, right? In a way that it should be illegal to not falsify your business records to do damage to federal election law. Doesn't. Trump's legal team insists that the disruption in document is a specific breach of constitutional and ethical duties. In a letter, Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, called Smith's admission of possible mismanagement, quote, a spoliation concession. I'm going to use that phrase the next time I get into an argument with my wife. I find that statement to be a spoliation concession. Listing demands for more information on those who handled the documents. Prosecutors clarified that the sequencing issue were largely due to the unexpected volume, which led to the substitution of cover sheets and handwritten placeholders. They maintained that the document shifts likely occurred during review that was ordered by Trump's team. And so that's the lay of the land in terms of the legal interventions into this election. If this holds, and again, I have not seen any evidence that it won't, then that means that the only 2 cases that will likely see their way to a significant portion of the trial, and certainly any kind of judgment, will be this New York this New York hush money case, and possibly the January 6th case in Georgia. But then we get, part 2 of the Fani Willis show. Fani Willis, sorry. And that's your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com, where you need to go to support this show. $3 tier gets you 2 bonus episodes each and every week. Joining us now is Eric Brakey of the Free State, is it project or movement?
Well, it's the Free State Project, which is the organization, and the Free State Movement is, everyone who's a part of the effort, right?
The movement.
One's a legal entity, one's something you carry in your soul and your spirit.
Yeah, that is unquantifiable in the matrix of our culture. Well, Eric, how do you come to being in any kind of leadership role in a project like this?
Well, I've been involved with kind of the Ron Paul liberty movement for the last 12 years. I just got started back in 2012 as a young kind of 23-year-old kid trying to make a difference, working as the state director for his campaign in Maine. That kind of one thing has led to another over the years, and over the last 12 years, I've taken over a state Republican Party. I've served 3 terms in the Maine State Senate. I've been a Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate and a primary candidate for the U.S. Congress. After 12 years of kind of like in the working within the belly of the beast of politics and all of that, I'm kind of passing the torch to others, and I realize I need a break, and I'd like to, serve the liberty movement in another way. And this opening came up, executive director of the Free State Project, right next door to me in New Hampshire. It's a fantastic organization that I've, been somewhat involved with over the course of the last decade, but it seemed like a great opportunity to continue serving the movement, serve in a new way, really, try to focus on a strategy that potentially works, which is rather than just kind of railing against the corrupt system as one voice kind of inside of a state legislature, to reach out to kind of the libertarian diaspora around the country and to focus on this idea of concentrating in one place, concentrating in the state of New Hampshire and creating a situation where we can really affect the politics and the culture of the state of New Hampshire to make it a libertarian homeland. That's what the Free State Project's been doing the last 20 years, and I think there's been a lot of successes to brag about.
So yeah, you just kind of did a shorter version, but if you could expand, where did that idea come from, and how has it evolved in the couple decades that it's been around?
Yeah, so it's been around. It was an idea. I think our founder, Jason Sorens, published a paper when he was like a doctoral candidate about kind of about this idea of political concentration. What if the libertarians of America chose one state to really focus on and to try to, through migration, try to concentrate in one place and recognizing that, we may be 1 to 5% of the overall American population that has these libertarian ideas. This country was founded on those ideas, but it's since lost in both our politics and our culture, we've lost sight of liberty. So rather than being the 1 to 5% railing against systems we don't like wherever we live, what if we didn't have to be 1 to 5%? What if we reached out to that 1 to 5% across America and we said, let's be much more than 1 to 5% in New Hampshire? So this has been going on for about 2 decades. Thousands of people have moved. We're building all kinds of communities within the state of New Hampshire, from homeschooling communities, agorist communities. Maybe you like Dungeons and Dragons and you want to play with a bunch of, libertarians. Whatever your kind of niche interest is, when you get thousands of people together in a state like New Hampshire, you have the opportunity for a lot of great community building. And also, a lot of our folks, being very politically active, run for the state legislature and make a difference that way. So we have the libertarians running as Republicans in the state of New Hampshire have, I think, more of a presence in state politics than any other state in the country.
So break that down for me, because the idea that concentrating a group of libertarians in one state means you would be able to do more. How do you track that? Is it by like people who just identify as libertarian, and then is there a reason that you would run as a Republican as opposed to the Libertarian Party?
Yeah, well, I suppose, you are, I guess libertarian just means that you don't want to hurt people and you don't want to take their stuff and you don't want to use government to do that, right? So beyond that, there are many different shades of libertarians, and we all infight with each other, as we are prone to do. But,
really? Wow.
but
that's interesting. Never heard of that.
But beyond that, if we can all kind of agree that we don't want to use violence against people, in an aggressive way, then, hey, we've all got a shared basis to build from there. As far as why people run as Republicans instead of Libertarians, certainly that's been my approach, working for the Republican Party for the last decade. And I think it really, my argument for that is purely a matter of utilitarian effectiveness. You could run as a Libertarian Party candidate for something, but your odds of actually winning that office are, unless you have a rare situation where it's a two-person race, there's no Republican in the race or no Democrat in the race, your odds of actually winning that are very slim to none, because we live in this plurality-based first-past-the-post, winner-take-all system, and people are motivated by voting for who they want to vote for, but they're even more motivated by voting against who they don't want to see there. And so it kind of creates a natural tendency to vote for the lesser of two evils if you think that's going to stop Hillary Clinton or whoever you really don't like. And so that means that if you are running in one of the two major parties, you have a floor of about 30% of the vote. You could be Adolf Hitler, and if you've got the R or the D next to your name, you're getting 30% no matter what. And to go from 30% to 50%, or 50% plus 1, is a lot easier than going from maybe the Libertarian floor of 1%, maybe, if you're being generous. You got to basically take every other vote that's still on the table and peel off sometimes some of the base voters for the other two candidates, which can be very difficult. So just use the political vehicle that's most effective at getting you to where you want to go. And if you want to actually win elections and actually pass policies that promote liberty and not just be throwing stones from the sidelines, you gotta work through one of the two major parties, or at least that's what I've seen. That's
your strategy. And so the win condition for, if let's say interviews like these trigger something in folks who are listening and saying, you want to know what? Screw Alabama or California or Iowa. I do want to live in a place that treasures these libertarian ideals. I am moving to New Hampshire. The win condition would not necessarily be libertarians being the majority in those state houses or in the governor's mansion, but rather just the policies that are passed that would be conducive to where you see the Free State Movement and Project having their values.
Yeah, certainly, having libertarian majorities in all these places would be nice. But, ultimately at the end of the day, and, truth be told, in the House of Representatives, libertarians are about 25% of the body, which is, I think, more than any other state in the country. So we're getting there. Who knows?
These are spiritual libertarians or party libertarians?
Spiritual libertarians. People.
There we go.
Libertarians running as Republicans.
Yes.
Because in the Ron Paul style. So
sure.
But ultimately, the goal is to live free. The goal is to have a libertarian society within our lifetimes. And whether that's because we have truly principled, philosophically pure people in government, or we just have people who we've shaped the political environment around the political class so much that they recognize the politically expedient thing for them to do is to support liberty because that's how they're going to get reelected. Either way, that gets us towards more libertarian policy outcomes. I'm okay with that, right? We just had many Republican legislators who are not liberty Republicans support tremendous school choice legislation because of the libertarian influence in the state. And now we have a system in New Hampshire where money follows the child. If you don't think that your student is being best served by the government school that they're assigned to, you can take a portion of those taxpayer dollars out, and you can homeschool, you can private school, you can go to a different government school for your kid. So, these are ways that, because of the strong libertarian culture and the growing libertarian presence in New Hampshire, you are seeing policies enacted in New Hampshire that are really leading the way on issues that folks in the liberty movement and the conservative movements have been talking about for decades, but we've never actually seen implemented. Now we can actually get these things implemented, see how they work, and now we're starting to see a lot of other states follow the example being set. It's a positive all around.
We met when the New Hampshire primary was happening. You came to the We're Not Wrong show. We had a conversation that was on the political orphanage at the New Hampshire Libertarians headquarters, and I really, really came away impressed with how much you've thought about the X's and O's of getting elected and actually advancing legislation that you find very important. And so I want to get to that in a second. But first, just so we can cement this for your incoming role, what is give me a postcard example of what life in New Hampshire could be for somebody, a thing that they could do, an example of something that happens in New Hampshire that just simply is not going to happen in another place because of the influence of this movement over the last 2 decades.
Well, I mean, I would say, if you're someone who loves liberty, I think one of the best things is that there's literally an event taking place every single day in the state of New Hampshire of people gathering, people who love liberty gathering and doing something. Maybe it's just like a farmer's market. Maybe it's people going rucking and or camping. People building community with each other in so many different ways.
Yeah.
People who don't want to sick the government on you if you live a way that they don't necessarily agree with, right? And that's something I think that needs to be experienced to be truly understood. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to come to New Hampshire and experience it, just like people can do this June at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which they can get tickets for at porkfest.com. Come for a week, see what it's like to live amongst libertarians, and
please explain that. Well, what is the Porcupine Freedom Festival?
So the Porcupine Freedom Festival is in its 21st year. This is the largest. It's like the Burning Man of the Liberty Movement, right? People come for a week. We're camping at Rogers Campgrounds in beautiful Lancaster, New Hampshire. We have many, both prominent kind of Liberty names coming that you might know, as well as just 2,000 just great people. There are many. There are speeches, there are debates, there are all these kinds of things. But there's also it's just a pop-up community for a week where people are starting people at their campsites are running, little businesses. Maybe they're running food trucks or they're setting up event hubs, and it's just kind of it's kind of the embodiment of spontaneous order, people leading and kind of creating their own events and having just the growth of the Porcupine Freedom Festival over the last 20 years has been I think a real testament to seeing just how a free voluntarist society could work, at least within the window of a week. So it's a fun thing to do. People come from all across the world, and tickets are on sale right now at porkfest.com. That's pork with a C because it's short for porcupine, not porkfest with a K, right? If you go to porkfestwithak.com, maybe you'll find a barbecue festival. It might be delicious, but that's not going to be what you're looking for.
Might be something else. So it sounds like Burning Man with just as many drugs and probably more guns.
There are plenty of guns. There are and there are drugs too. But
there we go.
It's what you want to partake in, and also
exactly.
Also,
yeah, you go your own way. But if we're going to talk about a libertarian, a perfect society, then let's get a little bit of the sugar in there. Drugs and guns. There's drugs and guns. Okay.
Yeah. But people also bring their families, and we have whole family zones and all that. So it's
of course. But also drugs and guns. Okay, so let's get into some of the modern state of libertarian politics, because it became big news this week. The Libertarian Convention happening in D.C., and it was announced that presumptive Republican nominee, Donald Trump, would speak at the conference. Now, you are a member of the Republican Party as a member of the State House. We've talked about your philosophy when it comes to that. You are not a member of the Libertarian Party, at least as we have talked. What is your perspective about the political efficacy of something like this?
Of having Donald Trump come to speak at the National Libertarian Convention?
Yes.
I think it's a great win for the National Libertarian Party. I think it shows relevance. The fact that let's be honest, right? The Libertarian Party is not going to be electing a United States president who's a registered libertarian this cycle. I mean, maybe in the future, maybe trends keep going towards third parties, and maybe there's a continued breakdown of kind of the two-party system, but we're certainly not there now. And I think that the ultimate kind of best outcome for the Libertarian Party in presidential campaigns like these is to establish relevance and to get attention for the ideas that we're trying to promote. And certainly a former president and potential next president of the United States coming and speaking, and ideally coming and making a pitch for like why libertarians like should consider supporting him, and it's not just going to be some generic like pitch that you're going to hear like on the general campaign trail. Like, I think that that's powerful to be in a position where people are coming to you because they recognize you are a swing voter bloc that they need to cater to. I mean, this is what we've experienced at PorcFest, for example, when we've had in recent years, we've had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. come and speak to PorcFest. We've had Vivek Ramaswamy come speak to PorcFest. It's because libertarians as a voting bloc, the fact that we do not have an allegiance to one of the two major parties, we have an allegiance to higher principles. We have votes that are winnable and up for grabs if someone from those two major parties comes to us and meets us on our priorities. So I'd love to hear Donald Trump come to the Libertarian National Convention and make the pitch that, he really screwed up last time by not pardoning, Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, but he's learned his lesson by the way the deep state has come after him, and he's finally going to follow through and grant those pardons. I'd love to hear him talk about his deeper concerns about like what is he actually going to do to avoid kind of World War III and this buildup of the military-industrial complex. Whether he's sincere in those things or not, others can judge. But if such a thing were to happen. But I think the fact that libertarians are being recognized as a pivotal swing voting bloc is a powerful place for libertarians to be in helping to set and alter the agenda in our government.
What do you say to critics that suggest that this is essentially just capitulation and surrender for the Libertarian Party, and instead of creating a candidate that could push some of those ideas and then have Donald Trump speak to them, instead it is starving oxygen for somebody that would, at the very least, even if they're not going to be the next president, be somebody that has their name said a lot and has an opportunity to advance things that the Libertarian Party actually wants out there in the public?
Well, I think that's a misunderstanding of the situation. First of all, I would say that, as I understand, I think Donald Trump is speaking like right after the Libertarian Party candidate debate, right? So that's going to bring all the national media to the convention that wouldn't otherwise be there, and perhaps they're going to get some coverage, some national coverage for the Libertarian Party candidates running for president that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten. So I do think
it'll be way down the paragraph, though. It'll be way down the story. You are assuring that the story will not be about the debate. It's going to be about Donald Trump speaking.
Well, there wasn't going to be a story about the debate anyway because of the way that the corporate press ignores things. And second of all, I would say too that I think that I think that sometimes we fundamentally misunderstand what the role of third parties is in our system. Like we've got the role we would like third parties to play. We have the system in our mind the way we would like it to work, and then we have how it actually works. And the way that it actually works is that third-party candidates are, at best, spoilers, right? You're not going to get a Libertarian Party candidate for president across the
from the POV of the Republicans, the Democrats, for sure.
Yeah, and it right, and sometimes it's great to run a candidate who's a spoiler, right? If the two candidates who are running for president are like just totally awful and or the Republican Party is like in the embrace of neoconservatism and wants to like start, World War III, and you're running a candidate to say, no, you better run better candidates because we can put forward our own people we're going to vote for until you meet us halfway on certain things. That's kind of a nice carrot and stick approach that gets, I think, the parties to realize that they need libertarians and they better not ignore the issues that are important to us. So I think there can be a fantastic role for a third party to play spoiler and to, in the long run, promote kind of the ideas that we care about. I think certainly the Democratic Party has learned some lessons by necessity with like when they've lost presidential races due to like Jill Stein and others. You can't. They've learned that you can't ignore the progressive base and win, because they'll go vote for a third party candidate. And I think libertarians. I think it's fair for libertarians to be in that same posture. You can't count on our votes, but you can win them by speaking to things we care about.
I've been very critical of this. I've called it an act of political cuckoldry to watch somebody come in and have their way with the voter base that is there at the moment where you should be making a star. And the reason why I think even the more I think about it, I've stuck with that opinion is that if there's not going to be a star making moment for somebody, and granted, big star, little star, whatever, somebody that within the libertarian orbit, especially in a chaotic inter-party phase that I think that the Libertarian Party is in, then the problem isn't going to be solved by adding another gigantic piece of noise to it, or there being essentially a commercial for people to not vote for the party that they are there at the convention for. Everything you've said, I agree with. And everything that you have said in terms of the role of third parties, I agree with. I think that third parties are best used, even if you understand that they're not going to win, to find a thing that forces one of the two major parties to capitulate on. And you listed a few of them right there, that it would be a great moment if Donald Trump came up on stage and said, here are the 5 people I'm going to pardon. Nobody else would be able to promise you this and do it. That would be good. That would be a meaningful win for the Libertarian Party. I don't know if it gets votes for the candidates that are going to be debating each other right beforehand. I don't know if it is good that the person who is going to come out as the nominee doesn't get a chance to talk to Donald Trump, if not in a debate and in some kind of conversation. There's just the idea of what I guess it's being presented as Donald Trump hears grievances from the Libertarian Party. I'll be interested to see how that materializes, because in all of my coverage of Donald Trump, there's really, White Castle fries only come in one size. He just comes out, is him, talks about exactly what he wants to talk about, and that's that.
And if that's what he does, then that'll be a tremendous missed opportunity on his part. He's not gonna win it. He's walking into what's potentially a very hostile audience, and that's going to be very challenging to him, as it should be. And he could blow it, right? He could blow it, and he could. I think that'll be kind of the interesting thing, is to see when he comes to speak to libertarians, does he have any actual awareness of the issues that libertarians actually care about, and where their criticisms of him lie? Because they're not the same criticisms that you're going to hear from like the corporate media. They're not the same criticisms. It's like, people in the corporate press, people attack him over COVID on, oh, he didn't lock down hard enough. Libertarians are going to criticize him on like, you kept Anthony Fauci in a position of authority for far long, and you let him kind of just run our country. Or, he gets attacked. Well, maybe you didn't spend enough money on kind of COVID bailouts, and the libertarians will be like, well, tell us about this like huge spending package, the biggest in human history, that you bragged about signing into law as you shut down our country, right? So I think that there is an opportunity here, one, for Donald Trump to, I guess, have to speak to criticisms that are an angle of criticism that you don't typically hear in the modern corporate day press. So I don't know. I think it's fascinating. It's going to be an interesting moment in the history of the country, one way or the other. And I just learned about it with you the other week. So we all just learned about it. I don't have any part to play in this other than being a commentator.
Oh, no.
It's interesting.
It's funny because we had this interview scheduled for a while, and I'm like, you're somebody that I think has a very unique perspective on it, because you are a realist in terms of elections, as you laid out. It's easier to get from 30 to 50 than it is to get from 1% to 50. And so I was very curious about your perspective, because it it didn't make a ton of sense beyond it will be a tremendous news-making vehicle. That is absolutely true. I would argue that it's probably the attention is going to go where the attention always goes when anything involves Donald Trump, which is to Donald Trump. And it will sell tickets. And that's the other thing that I have no idea on is, where was the attendance level before the event? And by the time that Friday rolls around, May 24th, for anybody who's not at the We're Not Wrong live show in the Anacostia Arts Center, tickets, I think there's like 3 tickets left for that. But will that crowd be Libertarian convention people? Or is it going to be a bunch of people that bought tickets because they have a chance to see Donald Trump speak at a historically interesting venue?
Mm-hmm. Well,
anyway.
Either way, it'll be fascinating to watch, and we'll see how it plays out. If Donald Trump bungles it, if the Libertarian Party is able to capitalize on it, and ultimately, the best thing that I think could happen is that people walk away with kind of a with some of the libertarian ideas being more in the popular conversation.
So that's the win. The win then is make the sound bite that comes out of this something that is predicated on a libertarian ideal, like that there's a question that is answered, good or bad by Donald Trump, but that question being something that you would want America to ask itself based on the libertarian principles. I will be. I'll be very curious, and I'll be very curious to see what Donald Trump kind of thinks is the thing to emphasize. I mean, maybe it's his war against the deep state. That's certainly something that speaks to, I think, kind of the libertarian skepticism of kind of the government apparatus right now. Though I'm not always sure. Donald Trump wants to tear down a lot of our enemies. I'm not always sure what he wants to replace them with, which could be just as problematic if you don't have a real concrete libertarian principles. Anyway, so it'll be a fascinating moment. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap now, with a lot of social issues. So that was my assumption. My assumption is it's going to be a lot of, kind of social culture war sort of stuff that I think will go over well with an element of the Libertarian Party. But as well as anybody, to say the Libertarian Party as 2 words and not a ever-growing and expanding paragraph of ideas and varying different cultures would be a mistake.
Yeah, and as you say that, I'm trying to think what culture war issues we're talking about. I sometimes see that within kind of certain aspects of kind of the libertarian movement, and I guess the MAGA conservative movement, whatever you want to call it, there's some overlap in terms of a recognition of a problem, but oftentimes very divergent in terms of what the solution is. So we can all agree, hey, we don't like that these things are being taught, that very sensitive topics around perhaps gender or sexuality are being taught to kids in government schools. And kind of the libertarian answer is to say, great, let's have school choice so that families can send their kids to whatever schools doing whatever teaching that they want. And if progressive families want their kids learning these things, they could send their kids to those schools and learn those things. And if other people want something different, they can do that. I'm concerned sometimes that the more kind of hard right is not to say, hey, let's decentralize and let's let people make their own choices, but let's swap out this curriculum instead, this one-size-fits-all curriculum for our own one-size-fits-all curriculum. And then we're just dealing with the same problem with a different flavor.
Yeah, and then, the other side of that is regardless of what your idea is, how exactly do you implement it? And that's something that I've always liked about you, is that you have a very realistic sense of, hey, it's not just that you have these principles. How are you going to write a law?
Right.
And have that be something that will stand up to scrutiny? How are you going to get the other people in this deliberative body to back it? How are you going to leverage the people that don't want to do it to stand down and have it become law? That's, where my frustration with the Libertarian Party often gets to, is that, boy, is there a lot of thoughts. There's a lot of blueprints, but not a whole lot of construction companies.
Yeah. I think kind of there's a fair criticism And of course, I say it's a fair criticism, but I'm coming at this as someone who's chose to walk
A
the
Republican,
path,
yeah.
right? But sometimes it feels like the Libertarian Party can be a little bit just like of a massive LARP, right? It's a live action role play of like having an influence and like making an impact on the politics of the country. But really, it's just inside this little bubble, and people outside the bubble don't care, right?
Don't care.
Remember, right? I had a debate a few years back now with Dave Smith about kind of what was a more politically effective path for libertarians to choose, working through the GOP or working through the Libertarian Party. And my argument was like, look, and this was back when the Mises Caucus was really kind of rising and trying to, on the path to take over the LP before they'd done it. But I just pointed out, there's a reason why so many folks are animated to take over the Libertarian Party, and it's because it's easier, right? Because nobody with any power was guarding the Libertarian Party, right? Dick Cheney doesn't care if, who controls the Libertarian Party. Joe Biden doesn't care who controls the Libertarian Party, right? But you look at other radical causes in this in our country, right? You look at like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They weren't spending their time and energy taking over the Green Party, right? Or the Peace and Justice Party. They've been working to take over the Democratic Party because that's where the power lies. And so I think that certainly as a platform to educate and spread ideas, I think there's a lot of value in the LP. But if you're really interested in actually, infiltrating the systems of our government and actually advancing liberty policy, the GOP's, I think, a pretty good vehicle for that.
Well, friends, if you are interested in living free and being a part of the Free State movement, then you should get involved and read more about the Free State Project, for which Eric Brakey is the incoming executive director. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. We've got a lot of work ahead. Anyway, taking every opportunity I can, let folks know, even if you can't move to New Hampshire tomorrow, just come for a visit, see what it's like, see what Liberty Community is all about.
Where can people read more about the Free State Project?
People can go to fsp.org, can learn all about us there. And again, porkfest.com for our upcoming event this June. Check that out. Come and join us. And you can follow me on Twitter at Senator Brakey.
Eric, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Hey, pleasure's all mine, Justin.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. I want to thank Eric Brakey for coming on the show. Good dude. And, I poke a lot of fun at the Libertarian Party. And obviously Brakey is not a member of the Libertarian Party, but he is somebody who does not only think very seriously about those issues, he is more of a builder and less of a blueprint fanboy. He actually thinks about trying to put these things into practice. And that's something that I do greatly appreciate. So thank you to Mr. Brakey for coming on. You want to email us. It is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. You want to find clips of this show and more. On TikTok, it is Justin R. Young. Instagram, Justin R. Young. On YouTube, this is the big one. Come follow us on YouTube. Everything that we do has a video component. All of our live streams are now also on YouTube. If you like me and you like my opinion on politics and there's something that, and other stuff, and you think there's something that we have not talked about, trust me, head on over to the YouTube. YouTube.com/@politics. On Twitter, I'm Justin R. Young, and you can share the audio version of this podcast exclusively, px3podcast.com. If you want to support this show, you can do so. PayPal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash, and you can send me a check, P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Of course, you can only get our bonus podcast at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $3 tier gets you 2 of them each and every week. And our $10 tier gets you that, plus your name read on the Titanic. $10 tier, including Sugar Brady, Sam, John, Niemeister, Edwin, Invoke Gloria Young for King of the New World Order, Brian, Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checkers, Sarah, Jeannie, Matthew, Dr. G, Shad, Chill, Dustin, Brad, D Laser, Nick, Just Another Pilot, Middle-Aged Mike, Utah, Jimmy, Montana, The Jen, Alo, D, Really, Andrew, Lisa, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Devon, the CFP, Gloria, Gray Zone, Peapod, Jay, Neil, John, DP4 Bongo, Neil, his nerdiness Charles, Aubrey Stoll Adler Spot, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Berkeley, Stephen, Pneumatic, Taryn, Molly's Delightful Demeanor, Adam, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, and Bluefront, and the Lenina. Come on, folks. Get on the list. You know you want to be a part of history of this crazy election. On Friday's edition of the show, we're going to do something a little fun. All right? We do have a little bit of a lull in the news. So, I'm going to talk about authenticity. Why it matters in politics. A political example of one campaign focusing on the authenticity of their opponent, and how it relates to one of the biggest entertainment stories of the year, the rap battle between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. If you have heard people talking about the rap battle between Drake and Kendrick Lamar, I'll give you a little bit of a primer so you understand what's going on, but we are going to relate it to the topic that we know best, and that is Donald Trump humiliating Ron DeSantis in the primary. And then after that, we're going to have Kimberly Leonard of Politico, somebody that has covered the state of Florida politically about as good as anybody in the game right now. She helped break the story that Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump reunited, and it feels so good. We get all the latest on that. That's on Friday's edition of the show. We'll see you then. Until, my name is Justin Robert Young. I want to remind you that some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss all three.